For our next row, we're going to do paper towel pickup, paper towel putting down. We're going to do a value scale, but we're going to bring wet paper into it. I'll show you that. Scumbling on dry paper, scumbling on wet paper, and charging. For paper towel pickup, you can do it with any amount of pigment, but I'm going to make mine fairly dark so the effect shows. I'm going to put color down, but I don't want it to be so wet that there's puddles. So like right now there's a lot of puddles there. The paper towels will probably pick up the water, and then the water would fill back in. So I do want to squeeze the extra water or paint off my brush and just pick up the extra puddles. So the paper's still wet, it's still very shiny. There's a decent amount of pigment on there. You're just going to take some paper towel, wrinkle it up. You're trying to create a rough texture there so you can see all of that texture, and then you're just going to press. Hold it for a second and then lift. So from there you can see that that texture is created. If you want to, you can do it again, but it does get to be to the point where you're creating more highlights and then you don't have the shadows either. So the reverse of this would be, now I have this puddle of paint. And again, create that wrinkly texture. I pick up the paint and I put it down. But if I keep dabbing the paper too much, eventually it will fill in. The way that we have the texture created on this is by having those white spaces in between. All right, for a value gradation into a wet area, I'm going to start off with, I don't know, maybe this time I'll use my flat brush. I would either use my flat or like a small mop brush or a medium mop brush. And again, I'm going to start off with kind of a wet line of paint. So you can see it's really a heavy coat of paint, but there's a decent amount of water in it. And I'm going to completely clean my brush, and down here I'm going to add water onto my paper. You can see it there, and I'm going to bring that water, I'm going to get a little more water on my brush, and I'm going to just keep bringing that water up. I just dipped it into the water again. You can see it's a good amount of water, and then eventually I'm going to just really carefully touch and connect the two, and then I just let it go. If I feel like it's not as even as I want, maybe I'll just go across one more time. You can see right here there's a little bit of a puddle, so maybe one more time. But really this is supposed to be a loose technique that you don't have a lot of control over, and it just creates kind of, these feeling of movement and a gradation in the background. I'm going to clean my brush off. If I've got this puddle of water down here, I can either pick it up or I could try to bring that puddle into it. Look at how, if I bring this puddle toward this, the paint actually starts to move backwards. You see how the paint is actually going away from the water on the brush. If you notice, what is that effect like? It's a background. So if you don't want those puddles, dry off your brush and just pick up the puddles. Scumbling. Scumbling you could try with different brushes. I'm going to grab this kind of angled brush called a deerfoot brush. I could also do it with the flat brush. I could even do it with a mop brush, but I want something this time I'm going to use something a little bit firmer. So, my camera here. I can use something with a decent amount of water. I could get some more pigment on it. Dilute it with a little water over here. So scumbling is kind of a scribbling technique, and you want your brush to be damp but not completely wet. So that was with the Deerfoot brush, which I can create these kind of textures with, but scumbling is really a scribbling. So as I take this, it's not just doing circles, but I'm kind of like jumping around and creating these lines and these textures, and then I could let it dry, and then I could go over it again with another color. Another thing I could do is maybe use a really small brush. I haven't taken it out of here, but there's a little tiny brush in this set. I can with that, but you can see how all of the lines really stayed put because the paper was dry. So now if I make my paper slightly damp, I don't want to puddle, but just a little bit of water so the paint can move. Again, no puddles, nothing's overflowing. And it's that same technique, but it just has a different effect because the colors are kind of bleeding into each other a little bit more on here than on that one. So that one's all about the mark making and then the water that's on the paper. All right, for a charge. I'm going to paint your area. It's not in a water, just enough so that it can move, but it's not running at all if I lift up the paper. Clean my brush. I'm going to get another color. I want to make sure that I have a good amount of water on my brush. You can see it is puddly, like there is a decent amount of water on my brush because I want more water on my brush because it's exactly the same run. It's do it with pigment. And change the longer it sits there as the is going to subside, and you will end up with rings, and they'll create some new colors. So I've got the 3 primers here, so they'll create a little bit of colors on there. And if I want highlights in them, I can either remove water, or I could add a little drop of water, but you can kind of create variation in that. It's really great for textured effect and for like bouquets, things like that, where you want just that feeling and that sense of the flowers, but you not draw every single little individual flower. And then once this is dry brushed, you can always go back in with one of these other techniques like scumbling over the top and kind of draw lines on it. And I just want to go back to this glazing technique. So this is dry. I painted this yesterday. And what I'd like for you to do is pick another color. I'm going to get yellow this time. I should show you this far away and then close up. So I'm going to get some yellow. I want enough water on my brush that I can draw a solid line, but you can see it's not so puddly like I had this one. I'm not going to go back and forth. My goal is to put the yellow on top of these two colors without disturbing these two. That's it. Did not go back and forth. So now you can see it created green, created orange, but I can still see the blue and the yellow. You can still see the red and the yellow. So this time I'm going to do a second stripe, and I'm going to use a color that's opposite. So let's see, opposite of red would be green. So I'm going to grab some green, and if I were to mix red and green, it would make a neutral. It would make a kind of a brown color. and on here obviously it would make a blue-green. But my goal here is to make red and green without having any brown really made, other than kind of like optically mixed, like your eye might mix it from a distance and kind of dull the color down. So I have green in here, so right now I feel like I should have had a little bit more pigment, but if I go into this, I'm going to pick up the red and it's going to mix in. So I'm going to let that one sit, and maybe I'll come back to that another day when it's dry, and I'll do another coat of green over it. But you can already see the effect starting. So you can see the red, you can see the green, you can see how they're mixing, but they're not making mud. If I work my brush over that, they are going to kind of muddy each other up. I'm really happy with the yellow though. That came out really vibrant, and you can see the glazing, the layering of colors on top of each other. And you can continue glazing with multiple colors. It doesn't have to be just two colors over the top of each other. I could go back in with another color. Maybe I'll do that even, diagonally or something.